Hi everyone, my name is Aubriana Tripp and I'm an art education major at Siena Heights. This project is a reflection of my journey as a liberal arts student at Siena Heights University. It specifically shows through the lens of Dominican missions and traditions and the values of Siena and how these things have shaped my education. Throughout this video, I'll be walking through the pages of my site. I want to highlight major takeaways from key courses and explain how my liberal arts education has prepared me personally, academically, and professionally for all the things that lie ahead. So, first off, this is my landing page. This homepage is a little bit of an introduction of who I am. I give a bio about um, who I am, what my major is, and how the liberal arts have shaped me and how I plan to employ them in my future. Along with this bio and introduction is a resume. I talk a little bit about my classroom work experience and how this relates to because this relates to my future career as a teacher. So I talked a little bit about my job as a student teacher at Tecumseh High School. I talked a little bit about um, being an instructor at the Adrian Center for Arts. I talked about being a substitute teacher. And I also talked about being a graduate assistant teacher at the Tech Center in the 22-23 school year. In addition, I talk about my education and my references, all the things that a resume may have. In addition, something that's really cool is as a student, I am able to join the Education Association. So I joined the Michigan Art Education Association and the National Art Education Association, which is really cool. I even got to attend a conference this last year. So, on to my next page, SHU Dominican Values and Missions. So, this page explores how Siena's Dominican values have impacted me. They particularly focus on community, reflection, truth, service, and justice and ministry. I included artifacts and visuals that show me living those values. In these pictures, you'll see me and some other people who helped at the downtown fires in Adrian that happened just a couple months ago. I'm a part of the EDS team, which is the Emergency Disaster Services team through the Salvation Army. So while the first responders are dealing with all their business, we are taking care of them. We feed them, we give them a place, we give them time to rest, and we give them drinks, we give them anything they might need so that they can be healthy and on top of their game to help our people. In addition, you'll see a picture of me volunteering at the youth group at the Salvation Army. And then you'll also see the protest I attended this weekend, which is the No Kings protest, which is protesting against harmful policies and the harmful administration in place right now. Again, I just further go into how these values have shaped me. So, next, I want to talk about the first LAS course that I decided to talk about, which is diversity in community. This course allowed me to connect the idea of community with real world issues that I cared very deeply about. I submitted two artifacts, a paper on the attacks on transgender rights in America and globally, and also a video connecting my work as an advocate with my teaching. There's a huge intersection there. But what really stood out to me in this class is realizing how education itself can be an act of both resistance and healing, and how education can be a tool of advocacy. So, in each of my pages, I talked about what the class is in my own opinion and own words. I talked about how I felt or saw the class before taking it. I talked about how I demonstrated the outcomes of the course. And then I also talked about how the course will affect me after graduation and how I'll take the things I learned after I'm done at Siena. And then I just gave a little bit of a conclusion. So, on to my next one. This is Living the Liberal Arts. So, this class helped me understand what liberal arts really means. Not just a checklist of subjects, but a way of thinking and engaging in the world. The artifacts I chose were a video, which is my final project, titled Are the Liberal Arts Racist? In this video, I talk about um, how I don't think the liberal arts are necessarily intentionally racist, but systematic racism and systematic oppression are very much prevalent in the world today and in our education systems. So it's a little bit of a call to action to be intentional about making sure that the liberal arts are accessible and inclusive. The other artifact I chose was an essay I wrote and a proposal I wrote for a center for marginalized youth called The Haven. Um, it is a center based on liberal arts values. I selected this piece because it translates my passion into a real world model of what it means to live the liberal arts and be an advocate. So these projects really helped to just help me articulate the kind of space I want to build as a teacher and as a person. And also, another key thing about this course in specific is before taking this class, I didn't really know what the liberal arts were. Obviously, I went to liberal arts school and I've heard the term, but I didn't understand the importance of them or why they mattered. And this class really gave me an insight into the importance of it, if that makes sense. On to the next one. So, this one is Scripture and Society. This class surprised me in the best way. I was very, very nervous before taking this class because I had seen religion used in harmful ways towards marginalized community. However, this class was fairly open-minded, very thoughtful, and the professor welcomed all points of view and celebrated my somewhat untraditional points of view. So for my artifacts, I included two sermons that I wrote for this course. I wrote one called the Revelation Sermon, and it talks about the book of Revelation instead of in the fire and brimstone way that many of us grew up with. It talks about it as metaphor for hope instead of destruction. And this course was a lot about reading the Bible metaphorically instead of literally, which is how most of us, including myself, grew up reading the Bible. The other artifact I chose was a sermon called In His Image. In this essay, I talked about um, how LGBTQ people are discriminated against in the church, and it was a call to action to be better. It talks about how clobber passages in the Bible were mistranslated and misused to be hateful. It's an excuse for bigotry. So, this is just a little bit about what I learned and how I demonstrated the outcomes of each course. The next class I took was Exceptional Children in a Regular Classroom. This class was really life changing for me, honestly, and maybe that's a little bit dramatic, but it's true because it was a light bulb moment for me. I went from being neutral about special education and I knew it was important, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. It took me from that place to being completely in love with working with neurodivergent and high needs students. I included in this as artifacts my final exam and a social story. But I also added a photo of me with a student I worked with throughout a whole semester, someone who reminded me why consistency and care matter. Um, this experience just inspired my future and has really impacted me. So, this right here is a young man who I worked with for a long time, and at first it was really difficult. Um, Even at the age of 8 years old, many adults had given up on him because of his behavioral issues and his um, his mental delays. And at first he tried to push me away, but I kept showing up. I kept showing consistency. I kept advocating him and fighting for him and showing that he mattered. And by the end of the semester, this is where we were. We were besties. He told me he loved me. and he did what I asked. And he started to believe in himself too, which is really, really exciting for me. This class is actually one that almost made me switch my major halfway through college. Um, I ended up deciding against that because I was halfway through college, but it did impact my choice to go for my master's in trauma informed education, which is not necessarily special education, but it goes kind of along with it. And it shows my commitment to working with the underdog, my passion for working with the underdog and the people that a lot of teachers and adults will give up on. Alrighty, so the next course I decided to talk about was reading and writing too. Well, yes, this is just a general education course, and um, I was definitely not very excited about it at first. It ended up being a space where I was able to write about things that I cared about, like inclusive education and systematic injustice and the American education system. And I realized that academic writing can be a tool for advocacy and ministry, not just something to get a grade on, which goes back to what we read about this semester as well a little bit. So, the first artifact I did was the inclusive education essay, where I talked about LGBTQ inclusive education and making those students feel loved and seen and included and represented. And then I talked, this essay is about, it's a planning for an essay about American education systems and how they are failing and or how they can do better. And lastly, the last class I chose to talk about was disciplinary literacy. This was an education class that I was not excited to take necessarily because I am an art teacher. Why does an art teacher need to take a writing class or a reading and writing class? I don't teach English, you know? That was my thought process. I didn't think this would apply to me, but it absolutely did. I learned that critiques, artist statements, analyzing visual artwork, creating artwork, talking about art, all of these things are forms of literacy. I in this I included a video I did that explains literacy in the art room. It talks about how reading in the art room, sometimes it could be actual reading, but sometimes it's analyzing a painting or talking about a painting. Um, Paintings tell a story, and when you analyze them, you're reading that story. And when you're creating them, you're writing a story. The other artifact I used was this picture of my AP high school art students from my student teaching placement um, engaged in a critique, and this shows my commitment to disciplinary literacy and including literacy in the art classroom. So, while, like I said, I wasn't incredibly excited about taking this class in the beginning of the semester, I fell in love with it, and now literacy in the art classroom is one of my passions. That and keeping students divergent thinkers, or how to foster divergent mindsets instead of turning them into convergent thinkers. Alrighty, so overall, this portfolio, this project, this class has helped to show that my liberal arts education at Siena wasn't just about checking off courses, it wasn't just about getting a degree or getting a job. It was about growing into somebody who is thoughtful, compassionate, and equipped to make a difference. I've learned how to bring critical thinking, ethical reflection, and creativity into every part of my teaching. And I've learned how to help students not just succeed in school, but to feel seen, valued, and empowered. Thank you so much for taking the time to view my portfolio. I hope it gave you a real glimpse into who I am and what I believe in. Thank you.